we have seen that there is this woman brooding over everybody's life in Egdon Heath, and there is this man who is about to arrive at this place, who finally arrives, and things start to develop between the two, while there are other characters whose lives are entangled in this whole mess. We have been through the first two books of The Return of the Native, and in this book we are going to look at what Hardy prefers to call. Welcome you all to NibblePop in our series on Thomas Hardy's The Return of the Native. I am Monami Mukherjee. Thank you for being with us. The first chapter in this third book is called My Mind to Me a Kingdom Is. Whose mind? Clym Yeobright's mind. So while the first two books focused primarily on Eustacia, how her mind works and her aspirations, in book 3 the focus shifts to Clym Yeobright. So you will see more of Clym, the things that happen to him and his reactions to them, and through that process you will also discover more about Eustacia, more about Clym's mother, and little details even about Wildlive and even the Little Man. So this first chapter, which is called My Mind to Me a Kingdom Is, begins with a description of Clym Yeobright. In Clym Yeobright's face could be dimly seen the typical countenance of the future. Should there be a classic period to art hereafter, its Phidias may produce such faces. Phidias was a very famous Greek sculptor, and he made wonderful statues, like statue of Zeus, which is considered to be one of the wonders of the ancient world. And if Phidias would be born at this time, he would paint or he would sculpt Clym Yeobright's face, because it has a certain look about it which matches with the Greek gods, And then he moves on to describe more about Clym. He had been a lad of whom something was expected. So always people had expectations from Clym. Beyond this, all had been chaos. That he would be successful in an original way, or that he would go to the dogs in an original way, seemed equally probable. So there will be something original about him. That is something everybody thought. The only absolute certainty about him was that he would not stand still in the circumstances amid which he was born. So he is supposed to change. He would definitely change. That is something everybody thought about him. And this expectation started to grow right from his childhood, and that is described in a very witty way. At the age of 6, he had asked a scripture riddle: who was the first man known to wear breeches? And because he was 6 years old, and usually 6-year-old children do not ask questions like these, which are serious questions, so everybody thought that he's going to be somebody. And applause had resounded from the very verge of the heath. At 7, he painted the Battle of Waterloo with tiger lily pollen and black currant juice in the absence of watercolors. By the time he reached 12, he had in this manner been heard of as artist and scholar for at least 2 miles round. So people started to talk about him for little things that he did. And then he says, possibly Clym's fame, like Homer's, owed something to the accidents of his situation. Nevertheless, famous he was. So it was more like an accident that he was famous, not for things he actually deliberately did, but things that simply happened to him. Something being expected of him, he had not been at home many days before a great curiosity. Now, Clym, he was away in Paris doing something important, and then he comes to Egdon and he's not leaving Egdon. So everybody had thought that he had come for a holiday and he would leave after Christmas, but he stayed on. So people started to become very curious that why is he not leaving? So something being expected of him, he had not been at home many days before a great curiosity as to why he stayed on so long began to arise in the heath. The natural term of a holiday had passed, yet he still remained. So people started talking, And one fine day when, some of the natives, they were engaged in conversation about Clym, why is he still here? Then Clym arrives at that place and he kind of guesses that they are talking about him. Now, folks, let me guess what you have been talking about. "Aye, sure, if you will," said Sam. Sam is a native. "About me? Now, it is a thing I shouldn't have dreamed of doing otherwise," said Fairway in a tone of integrity. "But since you have named it, Master Yeobright, I'll own that we was talking about ye." Notice their unusual kind of English. This is very, very ungrammatical English and such, but this is the way they talk. And this is their specialty. This is their accent. And therefore, Hardy tries to give you the real conversations or real accents that these people use. A similar kind of an effort is seen in case of Shaw. In many of his plays, we have these characters from remote places, from certain regions who show this regional dialect. So this is a dialect, it is English, but it's not London English. All right, so this is not the English which the narrator uses or even which Clym uses. Clym uses proper, sophisticated English, while these people are more close to Egdon's native soil. "We were wondering what could keep you home here mollyhawing about when you have made such a worldwide name for yourself in the knick-knack trade." Clym has not made any worldwide name, but to people of Egdon, even having any kind of professional achievement, small achievement in city like Paris, this appears to be something which makes a person famous worldwide. So he is the Bill Gates of Egdon. "I'll tell you," said Yeobright with unexpected earnestness. He's serious and he wants to tell them something. "I'm not sorry to have the opportunity. I've come home because, all things considered, I can be a trifle less useless here than anywhere else." He tries to say that he can be more useful here than in Paris, and he uses this rhetorical expression that he is less useless here than in any other place. "But I have only lately found this out. When I got away from home, I thought this place was not worth troubling about. When I had first gone to Paris, I didn't think about Egdon. I thought our life here was contemptible. I didn't like my life here. To oil your boots instead of blacking them, to dust your coat with a switch instead of a brush. Was there ever anything more ridiculous?" I said. So he also had a kind of loathing for this heathland, and he felt that people here were not, worthy neighbors. He didn't want to stay here. He went to Paris, but he changed his mind. "But you mistake me," pleaded Clym. "All this was very depressing, but not so depressing as something I next perceived. So I went there. I thought that things would change. I would feel good. That my business was the idlest, vainest, most effeminate business that ever a man could be put to. He was in diamond business, and he felt that he didn't belong there somehow. It was not masculine enough for him. It was not something that would make him feel charged up. That decided me. I would give it up and try to follow some rational occupation among the people I know best and to whom I could be of most use." So who are the people he knows best? The people of Egdon Heath. "I've come home, and this is how I mean to carry out my plan. I shall keep a school as near to Egdon as possible, so as to be able to walk over here and have a night school in my mother's house." So he wants to be a full-time school owner. He wants to run schools. "But I must study a little at first to get properly qualified. Now, neighbors, I must go. Back then, they didn't have teacher training courses or institutions. So if somebody wanted to be a teacher, they would educate themselves, teach themselves the tricks and tips of teaching, and somehow get into the profession, open a school. That was very normal. So he wanted to pursue that normal course. And Clym goes away from there. After Clym leaves that place, the natives who were listening to him, they pass this remark. "He'll never carry it out in the world," said Fairway. "In a few weeks, he'll learn to see things otherwise." "'Tis good-hearted of the young man," said another. "But for my part, I think he had better mind his business. This expression, mind his business, it is not something very rude that they are saying. They want to say that Egdon Heath belongs to natives and to professions that are undertaken by the farmers, the dwellers of Egdon. The kind of educational mission that Clym has, it might not work out within the scheme of Egdon. This is what the native understands, and this is native wisdom. And we will see in the course of this novel how Hardy goes on and on prioritizing native wisdom, the wisdom of nature. And he shows that these folks who do not have a conventional education, they have a more instinctive awareness of life, a more wise understanding of the ways in which Egdon works. And this is something that takes us to the next chapter, in which we will see how Clym's decision is affecting his mother and their relationship. The chapter's name is The New Course Causes Disappointment. Disappointment in Mrs. Yeobright, of course. Now, before going into what happens between Clym and his mother, Hardy gives us more insight into Clym's mind. What kind of a mind Clym had? Was Yeobright's mind well proportioned? Did he have a balanced mind? No. There it is. He doesn't have a balanced mind. He is the hero of our novel. He doesn't have a balanced mind. And then Hardy goes on to explain to us that heroes never have balanced minds. Balanced minds are for mediocrity and for ordinary people. Here, Hardy gives us this beautiful paragraph. Was Yeobright's mind well proportioned? No. A well proportioned mind is one which shows no particular bias, one of which we may safely say it will never cause its owner to be confined as a madman, tortured as a heretic, or crucified as a blasphemer. So blasphemers, heretics, madmen, they have minds which are not in a balanced proportion. Also, on the other hand, that it will never cause him to be applauded as a prophet, revered as a priest, or exalted as a king. So while madmen, heretics and blasphemers have non-well proportioned minds, similarly kings, priests, prophets, people who achieve a kind of greatness, they also have a disbalanced mind. Its usual blessings are happiness and mediocrity. So if you have a balanced, well-proportioned mind, you will get a happy, mediocre life. It never would have allowed Yeobright to do such a ridiculous thing as throw up his business to benefit his fellow creatures. Now here we have a man who is throwing up his business simply to be useful to his countrymen. Well, that is something which madmen do. So here Hardy what is he doing? Is he actually criticizing Yeobright? No, he is glorifying him, because this is why he is the hero of our novel. Anyway, he has this conversation with his mother, who definitely doesn't want him to be heroic in this way. I'm not going back to Paris again, mother, he said. At least in my old capacity, I have given up the business. Mrs. Yeobright turned in pained surprise. I thought something was amiss because of the boxes. I wonder you did not tell me sooner. I ought to have done it, but I have been in doubt whether you would be pleased with my plan. I was not quite clear on a few points myself. I am going to take an entirely new course. So he wanted to read up things, make a survey of situation and then tell his mother what his new plans are. I am astonished, Clym. How can you want to do better than you have been doing? So you are earning money. How much more do you want? Very easily, but I shall not do better in the way you mean. No, I'll not earn more money. Okay, so he's clear in that. I suppose it will be called doing worse. That means my income will reduce. It's a philanthropic mission I am on. But I hate that business of mine. I want to do some worthy thing before I die. As a schoolmaster, I think to do it. A schoolmaster to the poor and ignorant, to teach them what nobody else will. If you look at Clym, in an unbiased way, he would surely see that this is one man who is really heroic, and there have been men like this. You look at Bengal Renaissance, you see how people were selfless and they threw away their business, their earnings, simply to do good for people. And there is Clym Yeobright. So, yes, this civilizing mission that he has, this was a very common thing, at least in this Victorian age, because during this time we have thinkers and philosophers who were trying to tell people that there is one way of teaching, one way of educating the natives out of their ignorance. So this civilizing mission which colonial British people were adopting in eastern countries, they were also adopting in their own native country lands or countrysides. This is one of such attempts. So here Clym is having that same kind of white man's burden on his shoulders, where he thinks that it is his responsibility to uplift the people around him who, according to him, are downtrodden. But according to him, let's see who is downtrodden in this novel. After all the trouble that has been taken to give you a start, and when there is nothing to do but to keep straight on towards affluence, so I have done so much to get you into this position. Now the only thing you need to do is go on doing what you're doing and get rich and famous. You say you will be a poor man's schoolmaster. Your fancies will be your ruin, Clym. There's something prophetic about it. Later, during dinner, the conversation resumes along the same lines when Christian Canton is a native and he usually serves Mrs. Yeobright, and he comes to inform them of an incident that has happened that day. They asked what's the incident, and he says, "This morning at church, we was all standing up and the parson said, 'Let us pray.' So they were in the church about to pray. Well, thinks I, one may as well kneel as stand. So down I went, and more than that, all the rest were as willing to oblige the man as I. We hadn't been hard at it for more than a minute. So they were praying for a minute, kneeling down, when a most terrible screech sounded through church. Somebody screamed, okay? As if somebody had just guyed up their heart's blood. All the folk jumped up, and then we found that Susan Nonsuch had pricked Miss Vi with a long stocking needle. So Eustacia was there in the church, and Susan Nonsuch, who is Susan Nonsuch? Johnny Nonsuch's mother, that little boy who was tending Eustacia's fire. So Susan Nonsuch, she pricked Eustacia with a big needle. And why did she do that? As she had threatened to do as soon as ever she could get the young lady to church, where she don't come very often. She have waited for this chance for weeks so as to draw her blood and put an end to the bewitching of Susan's children that has been carried on so long. Sue followed her into church, sat next to her, and as soon as she could find a chance in went the stocking needle into my lady's arm. Susan Nonsuch is trying to take off Eustacia's influence from her son's life. And this is what native peoples believe. They have their superstitions, and it was common to consider a woman a witch if she showed any kind of power over people, any kind of power which the ordinary people could not comprehend. And Eustacia, with her fearless nature, with her clearly sophisticated attitude, she was the person who was considered to be the other by these natives, by these native women, and they could not see her as a positive force in their lives. And whatever bad happened to them, they always concluded that Eustacia Vi was responsible for it. She was the witch who was causing all the disturbances in their lives. Mrs. Yeobright is clearly shocked. Good heaven, how horrid! And then Christian Cantle goes on to describe the whole situation, and they were all feeling bad about it. Yeobright says, "'Tis a cruel thing." "Yes," said his mother. Clym also inquires if she was able to walk home, which shows that he's having concerns about this woman. Then we have this person Sam, who comes in and wants a long rope because, at Eustacia's place there is this well and a bucket has fallen and they have to lift it up, so they need a big rope. Clym wants to go there, actually to talk to her, and Sam says that he can always come along to help. Then we see how Clym goes there, how people, they start hauling that bucket, and finally we have a situation where Eustacia and Clym, they are very close to each other now, standing looking at each other, and there Eustacia asks if it will be possible for her to draw water there that night, because things were not easing out, that problem was not solved. Yeobright and Eustacia, whenever Hardy says Yeobright, he means Clym Yeobright. Don't confuse with his mother. Yeobright and Eustacia looked at each other for one instant, as if each had in mind those few moments during which a certain moonlight scene was common to both. So both of them looked at each other. Clym remembers that night when Eustacia had come performing as a Turkish knight, and with a glance, the calm fixity of her features sublimed itself into an expression of refinement and warmth. Look at the expressions which Hardy is using here. Clym says that if she doesn't have any water at home, he could manage to get some from his house, and she says it won't be necessary. We all know that there is a pond where that stone used to drop in. So Eustacia takes Clym to that spot where she shows him that pool and says that my grandfather feels that this pool water is clean enough, because it is cleaner than other kinds of water he was used to when he was in the navy. But she doesn't like to drink from a pool. Listening to her, Clym wanted to help her out and try to get some water out of that well, for which he wants her to hold the rope at one end and things. And things turn out in this way that suddenly that rope slips and it hurts her. She is wounded a little bit. Clym ran to her side and found he could only check the rope by twisting the loose part round the upright post, when it stopped with a jerk. "Has it hurt you?" "Yes," she replied. "Very much?" "No, I think not." She opened her hands. One of them was bleeding, so it was a cut. Clym was very sad at this, that he was very sorry that she is hurt again. She in fact says this: "This is the second time I have been wounded today." "Ah, yes, I have heard of it. I blush for my native Egdon." He feels sorry that people of Egdon are superstitious. So this is what happens. He thinks that he is responsible for all the ignorance of these people and all the superstitions of these people, and therefore it is his responsibility to drag them out of it. Nobody asked him. He kind of imposed this whole responsibility on himself. "It was dastardly of the woman," said Clym. "Will not Captain Vi get her punished?" So he didn't approve of this action by Susan and such. Eustacia says that she felt very humiliated. "Don't you think it dreadfully humiliating? I wished I was dead for hours after, but I don't mind now, because she is in good company now. I have come to clean away these cobwebs." See, Clym with his idealistic words, cobwebs, things that delude you, things that hide your proper judgment, or things that stop you from seeing things clearly. Those are cobwebs, and he wants to clean the cobwebs in the minds of Egdon's native people, the cobwebs of superstition. And then he says something very interesting. "Would you like to help me by high-class teaching? we might benefit them much. So he wants to include Eustacia in his plan of educating the masses. We know how Eustacia is. I don't quite feel anxious too. I have not much love for my fellow creatures. Sometimes I quite hate them. Still, I think that if you were to hear my scheme, you might take an interest in it. It's actually making a good sales pitch here. There is no use in hating people. If you hate anything, you should hate what produced them. Do you mean nature? I hate her already. She hates Egdon. But I shall be glad to hear your scheme at any time. Now, Eustacia knows that the only way to keep this man talking with her is to keep this man talking with her. And all that this man wants to talk about is his scheme. So let it be. Let's just hear him out. At least he'll stay with me. That is Eustacia for us. Finally, Clym says something to her which appears to be quite forward, considering this is their second meeting. We have met before, he said. I do not own it, said Eustacia with a repressed look. Because, well, she was disguised. So she says, no, I didn't meet you. But I may think what I like. Yes, you are lonely here. See, now Clym is getting into that shady territory of Eustacia's mind and Eustacia's heart. And he doesn't know what kind of woman she is. He tries to get inside her mind and he talks about loneliness with her. I cannot endure the heat. Except in its purple season, the heat is a cruel taskmaster to me. Taskmaster. Can you say so? To my mind, it is most exhilarating and strengthening and soothing. I would rather live on these hills than anywhere else in the world. Remember one thing, Clym is born here. When you're born somewhere, you are naturally glued to that place. A lot of childhood nostalgia work in your favor. And the fact that he has been to Paris, he has been to those civilized cities, it is easier for him to now feel nostalgic about the heat and wanting to come back. It's like Wordsworth thinking about Tintern Abbey, sitting in his room in London or Paris or any other city. So that is what Clym is talking about. He's tired. But Eustacia is tired of this heat. She has not been anywhere else to be tired of that place. That is what she says. It is well enough for artists, but I never would learn to draw. Clym says, I remember when I had the same longing for town bustle. Clym says, yes, I also wanted to go to town like you want to go to city. 5 years of a great city would be a perfect cure for that. You stay 5 years in the city and you completely start hating city life. And then Eustacia says, oh, I would love to have a cure like that. That means she would love to at least go and stay in a city for 5 years. Okay, she can't even imagine it can be tiring. Heaven send me such a cure. Now, Mr. Yeobright, I will go indoors and plaster my wounded hand. She wants to go back. So after this interaction with Eustacia, Clym comes home, interacts with his mother again, over the same thing, of course. And over time, her mother begins to notice that Clym is going out a lot. And sometimes he comes back and there's a red mark very close to his mouth and she can guess what had gone by before in the evening. When confronted, Clym finally has to admit that he and Eustacia are a thing. And Mrs. Yeobright is clearly very, very disappointed. Looking at her mother's disappointment, Clym asks, how am I mistaken in her? She is lazy and dissatisfied. But that is not all of it. Supposing her to be as good a woman as any you can find, which she certainly is not, why do you wish to connect yourself with anybody at present? So, Mrs. Yeobright is possessive, yes. And somehow I feel sorry for her because she had faced such disappointment in Thomasin. And we have seen how Thomasin's marriage has actually worked out. And somehow we feel that Mrs. Yeobright perhaps was pretty right about Wildlive not being a very good match for Thomasin. And here she is getting disappointed again. So things are really getting hard for this woman who is definitely feeling very lonely right now. Clym goes on to argue in favor of Eustacia. If I take a school, an educated woman would be invaluable as a help to me. What? You really mean to marry her? It would be premature to state that plainly, but Clym doesn't deny it. And then Mrs. Yeobright says, she doesn't have any wealth. She can't support your mission. And then Yeobright says that, no, I'm not interested in her wealth. She can be a very good companion. She is educated and she can be a matron, and he is having his dreams and his fantasies. This is Clym's problem. His dreams are so overpowering that it actually kind of hinders him from seeing what actually is happening around him. It is he who is having these cobwebs. The irony is that he wants to clear cobwebs in other people's minds, but he has to clear his own cobwebs. His high idealism is praiseworthy, but it's so impractical, and he fails to understand who will be useful to help him out in this. So he is living in a world of fantasy, and he feels that he's going to have one of the best schools in the county. Mrs. Yeobright has only one thing to say: you are blinded, Clym, and she's so right. Fourth chapter, an hour of bliss and many hours of sadness. This is what Hardy gives you. He gives you a title and he gives you a hint. You remember that first book, second chapter's title, Humanity Appears on the Scene Hand in Hand with Trouble. So he always has this additional spoiler coming along your way, and he says 1 hour of happiness which is going to lead to many hours of sadness. Okay. So what 1 hour of happiness is he talking about? Let's see first. Clym tells his mother that there's going to be an eclipse of the moon. I'm going out to see it. He goes and there's this description. While he watched the far removed landscape, so he was standing on a particular place and he could see something right in front. A tawny stain grew into being on the lower verge. The eclipse had begun. This marked a preconcerted moment, for the remote celestial phenomenon had been pressed into sublunary service as a lover's signal. I will explain this line to you. This line is very important. Let's break this up. Celestial phenomenon. What is the remote celestial phenomenon? In ordinary English, distant heavenly happening. That is the eclipse. So the eclipse is happening in the sky, which is away. But this incident or this phenomenon had been pressed into a sublunary service. Lunar means related to the moon. So eclipse is something which is a lunar thing, something which happens to the moon. But this eclipse is now working as a sublunary service, something serving human beings. Why? Because now this eclipse is like a signal for the two lovers to meet. What was the signal in case of Eustacia and Wildeve? A bonfire that Eustacia lit. What is the signal for Clym and Eustacia to meet tonight? The eclipse. So imagine the huge change in scale. It's like a massive universal scale that we are getting now. As if, that line, the whole universe conspires to get you together. That kind of a romantic thing working here. But it is an eclipse. This is not a sunshine. Remember that. Yeobright's mind flew back to earth at the sight. He arose, shook himself and listened. So he was looking at the moon, and when that figure arrived at the horizon, he started looking at the figure, but the figure was not moving much. Minutes passed, and finally, when that figure came close, he went further. In a moment, the figure was in his arms and his lips upon hers. My Eustacia, Clym, dearest. So we know from these warm expressions that they have been meeting quite a lot these days. Such a situation had less than 3 months brought forth. So they took 3 months to be this intimate. And then Clym started to say, why didn't you come earlier? He was standing there. You said 10 minutes after the first mark of shade on the edge of the moon, and that's what it is now. Well, let us only think that here we are. Then, holding each other's hand, they were again silent, and the shadow on the moon's disk grew a little larger. Look at the setting that Hardy is creating. He's choreographing this disaster. This moon is getting shaded by the eclipse, and here Clym and Eustacia are looking forward to a new life together. Has it seemed long since you last saw me? It has seemed sad. So they're having these conversations that lovers have. And then Eustacia, with her possessive nature, starts asking picky questions. In what way is that? You have been thinking you wished you did not love me? How can a man wish that and yet love on? No, Eustacia. Men can, women cannot. Well, whatever I may have thought, one thing is certain, I do love you. Past all compass and description, I love you to oppressiveness. I, who have never before felt more than a pleasant passing fancy for any woman I have ever seen. Let me look right into your lit face and dwell on every line and curve in it. He is really obsessed with Eustacia here. And then he looks at her eyes and says, why is your eyes always so droopy? And she says, no, it is my general way of looking. I think it arises from my feeling sometimes an agonizing pity for myself that I was ever born. I'm so depressed all the time. I don't like my life, so my eyes are droopy. You don't feel it now? No. Yet I know that we shall not love like this always. Nothing can ensure the continuance of love. She knows that hearts break. She has been through heartbreaks before. It will evaporate like a spirit, and so I feel full of fears. You need not. Ah, you don't know. You have seen more than I, and have been into cities and among people that I have only heard of. You have been to so many places, Clym, and have lived more years than I. But yet I am older at this than you. I loved another man once, and now I love you. There are no secrets. She is very assertive. Clym is not interested to know about her ex and her feelings. And she says, in God's mercy, don't talk so, Eustacia. But I do not think I shall be the one who wearies first. So whenever there are two people in love with each other, it is felt that one of them will get tired first of the other. And she says, I will not be tired of you first. You will be tired of me. It will, I fear, end in this way. Your mother will find out that you meet me and she will influence you against me. She is not very wrong, is she? That can never be. She knows of these meetings already. And she speaks against me? I will not say. There, go away. Obey her. She is trying to be, a little bit impulsive here, as if to force him out somehow out of Mrs. Yeobright's influence. Obey her. I shall ruin you. And then she says, kiss me and go away forever. Forever. Do you hear? Forever. Not I. It is your only chance. Many a man's love has been a curse to him. Is she giving a disclaimer to him somehow? You are desperate, full of fancies and willful. Isn't he so? Isn't he desperate? Isn't he full of fancies? Well, he doesn't have that kind of self-knowledge, it seems. And then he says, I have additional reason for seeing you tonight besides love of you. And he openly proposes. This very evening I do not like to let you go. There is only one cure for this anxiety, dearest. You must be my wife. Eustacia is quite happy at the proposal. But what happens after this is not something she wants to hear. Clym wants to stay here and she wants to leave. And in fact, she goes on telling him that she wants to hear about Paris. And look at the way she speaks here. I must think, at present speak of Paris to me. Is there any place like it or not? It is very beautiful. But will you be mine? I will be nobody else's in the world. Does that satisfy you? Yes, for the present. Now tell me of the Tuileries and the Louvre. She continued evasively. Louvre is that beautiful museum in Paris. He goes on talking about those places a bit, and when he starts talking about uh, English Sundays, Eustacia says she hates them. I dislike English Sundays. How I should chime in with their manners over there. Dear Clym, you'll go back again. So will you go back to Paris again? Clym shook his head and looked at the eclipse. If you'll go back again, I'll be something. If you'll agree, I'll give my promise without making you wait a minute longer. So she's putting a condition here that if he goes back to Paris, she will definitely marry him. How extraordinary that you and my mother should be of one mind about this. Clym feels that his mother hates Eustacia, Eustacia hates his mother, but both of them want him to go back to Paris. So in this, they are together. I have vowed not to go back, Eustacia. It is not the place I dislike. It is the occupation. I don't want to go there and work the way I was working. But you can go in some other capacity. You do some other work then. No. Besides, it would interfere with my scheme. Don't press that, Eustacia. Will you marry me? I cannot tell. So the moment he says that he'll not go back to Paris, she is not very interested. Now, never mind Paris. It is no better than other spots. Promise, sweet. You will never adhere to your education plan. I am quite sure. Eustacia wants Clym's plans to fail so that she can go back to Paris. And she says that I know your plans will fail and therefore you will go back to Paris and therefore I am going to marry you. And then it will be all right for me. So I promise you to be yours forever and ever. She is also very hasty. Clym is eluded in his idea that Eustacia is going to support him. Eustacia is eluded in the idea that Clym is going to go to Paris. Both of them are wrong. So it's kind of a contract that is made between two people who do not dream the dreams that the other person have. And therefore, they cannot have a happy life together because their condition of being happy is dependent on the unhappiness of the other, the broken dreams of the other person. If Clym is happy, Eustacia is broken. If Eustacia is happy, Clym is broken. What kind of a contract is this? Eustacia exclaims, only I dread to think of anything beyond the present. What is, we know. We are together now, and it is unknown how long we shall be so. The unknown always fills my mind with terrible possibilities. Even when I may reasonably expect it to be cheerful. Clym, the eclipsed moonlight shines upon your face with a strange foreign colour and shows its shape as if it were cut out in gold. That means you should be doing better things than this. You are ambitious, Eustacia. No, not exactly ambitious, luxurious. I ought to be of the same vein to make you happy, I suppose. And yet, far from that, I could live and die in a hermitage here with proper work to do. So their dreams are different, their choices are different, and they are somehow yoked together violently, like those metaphysical conceits. Sharp words are spoken and a crisis ensures. Of course, Mrs. Yeobright is going to be very, very angry at this. She actually confronts Clym, saying that, are you engaged to Eustacia? And Yeobright doesn't deny. And he also says that he's not going back to Paris. What will you do with the wife then? Keep her school in Budmouth, as I've told you. Clym has a fight with his mother and he goes to meet Eustacia, who understands that something has happened. But darling, what shall we do? Said he. Still go on as we do now, just live on from meeting to meeting, never minding about another day. Eustacia has this carpe diem going on in her mind all the time. She wants to seize the moment, live the moment. Maybe, she lost her parents so early. And when you lose your parents at a very young age, maybe you begin to distrust even happy days, and you want to live the most because you don't know what's going to happen the next day. When there was a day when she woke up and her mother was not there, her father was not there. So she doesn't trust happiness. And people who don't trust happiness, they talk about carpe diem. She's doing exactly that. You are just like all women. They are ever content to build their lives on an incidental position that offers itself. Listen to this, Eustacia. There is a subject I have determined to put off no longer. Your sentiment on the wisdom of carpe diem does not impress me today. Our present mode of life must shortly be brought to an end. So, does he want to end the affair? No. He wants to end the state of remaining unmarried, and he wants to marry him, and he wants to marry her. Oh, Clym, do you agree to it? If we can, we certainly can, both being of full age. And then Clym says that he is going to live in a tiny cottage after marriage until he takes a house in Budmouth for the school. So their original plan is they will live in a tiny cottage in Egdon, and then after he accumulates some money, he will go to Budmouth, which is a nearby town, and they can have a school there. How long shall we have to live in the tiny cottage, Clym? About 6 months. At the end of that time, I shall have finished my reading. Yes, we will do it, and this heart aching will be over. We shall, of course, live in absolute seclusion, and our married life will only begin to outward view when we take the house in Budmouth, where I have already addressed a letter on the matter. Would your grandfather allow you? I think he would, on the understanding that it should not last longer than 6 months. So, okay, I can live with you in a cottage for 6 months, only if you promise that we will go to Budmouth after that. I will guarantee that if no misfortune happens. If no misfortune happens, which is not likely, dearest, fix the exact day. And then they consulted on the question, and the day was chosen. It was to be a fortnight from that time. 6th chapter brings us to the final heartbreak of Mrs. Yeobright. Yeobright decides to leave his mother's place, and when he goes to look at the cottage where he would be living with Eustacia after marriage, there's this beautiful description that Hardy gives. He extracts himself away from his house at Bloomsend and goes towards this lonely cottage, and there's this forest area. And how is the description here? Let's see. Here the trees, laden heavily with their new and humid leaves, were now suffering more damage than during the highest winds of winter, when the boughs are especially disencumbered to do battle with the storm. The trees there around him, they usually face a lot of storm during the winter. But this was not winter. This was the time of pruning, when branches are cut. And when these long branches are cut, then sap comes out like bleeding from the trees, white blood from the trees. The wet young beeches were undergoing amputations. So it's like their limbs were being cut off, these beech trees. Bruises, cripplings, and harsh lacerations, all these expressions actually refer to things that happen to human beings. We don't say that for plants or trees, but Hardy feels that these trees with their cut out limbs, they are showing the kind of wound which Clym Yeobright is probably feeling inside him, because a same kind of cutting off is seen when Clym goes away from his mother. Each stem was wrenched at the root, where it moved like a bone in its socket, and at every onset of the gale, whenever there was any kind of wind, Convulsive sounds came from the branches as if pain were felt. Egdon Heath was wounded here in this spot. And through that wounded spot, Clym was walking towards what? A kind of cottage which could provide him happiness. So much of contrary is placed here in front of us. The eclipse and now these woundings. Yet a few yards to Yeobright's left on the open heath, how ineffectively gnashed the storm. Those gusts which tore the trees merely waved the firs and hither in a light caress. Egdon was made for such times as these. Where there was this open heath, the storm has less of an impact. Why? Because there were no tall trees, or simply it was a bushy area where the wind passed over the firs, which shows that Egdon Heath, which is primarily a heathland, tolerates storms better than forest lands. This means that Egdon is more suited to survive than the trees which try to stand up tall against the storm. Follow the rules of Egdon, be like a firs, you will survive, become a tall tree, have ambitions, and you will be wounded and amputated and dead. He comes back to his mother to wish her goodbye because he is leaving. And will you part friends with me? Certainly, Clym. Mrs. Yeobright will not keep any contact with him. She has had enough. I'm going to be married on the 25th. I thought you were going to be married. And then you must come and see us. Clym knows how she feels. Why is he even asking her? I do not think it likely I shall come to see you. Then it will not be my fault or Eustacia's. Mother, goodbye. Mrs. Yeobright, who appears so stern when she talks with her son here, as soon as he leaves, she breaks down. No sooner had Yeobright gone from his mother's house than her face changed its rigid aspect for one of blank despair. After a while she wept, and her tears brought some relief. During the rest of the day, she did nothing but walk up and down the garden path. So she is totally broken down. And then she goes to Clym's room. She went on to her son's room and with her own hands arranged it in order for an imaginary time when he should return again. Mrs. Yeobright is in such a sad state. You might say she could have easily participated in her son's wedding. But when she knew that this marriage is going to fail, his dreams are going to fail, she cannot be there and witness this tragedy of her son's life. She also has her maternal instincts kicking in. On the other side of the heath, Wildiv is standing, and this cart comes in and he asks a question. You come from Mistover? Said Wildiv. Mistover is the place of Eustacia Weil. Yes, they are taking in good things up there, going to be a wedding. So that driver is excited because he's carrying a lot of load up there. Wildiv had not received an inkling of the fact before. Wildiv had not known about this affair or even this wedding. So he was totally taken aback. At a sudden expression of pain overspread his face. He turned for a moment into the passage to hide it. Then he came back again. Do you mean Miss Vi? How is it that she can be married so soon? By the will of God and a ready young man, I suppose. You don't mean Mr. Yeobright? Yes, he has been creeping about with her all the spring. I suppose. She was immensely taken with him. Oh, they were having a good affair. She's crazy about him. So their general servant of all work tells me. And that lad Charlie that looks after the horse is all in a daze about it. The stun Paul has got fond like of her. Is she lively? Is she glad? Going to be married so soon? Well, it isn't so very soon. No, so very soon. Eustacia is quite in the age of marriage. So he is saying soon because he feels that she's just broken ties with me. How can she get married so early, so soon? Wilding went indoors to the empty room, a curious heartache within him. He rested his elbow upon the mantelpiece and his face upon his hand. So he's sitting like this. When Thomasin entered the room, he did not tell her of what he had heard. The old longing for Eustacia had reappeared in his soul. And it was mainly because he had discovered that it was another man's intention to possess her. Same kind of instincts. Eustacia liked Wilding because Thomasin wanted to marry him. Now Wilding has renewed interest in Eustacia because another man was in the picture. To be yearning for the difficult. Now, why is this the case with Wilding? Wilding always likes things which he cannot get. Now, Eustacia earlier had been somebody who was available to him. So, he kind of grew tired and came back a bit. Now that Eustacia is not available to him, well, he is now thinking only about her. It's like in a Petrarchan sort of way. Okay. To care for the remote, to dislike the near. It was Wilding's nature always. This is the true mark of the man of sentiment. Though Wilding's fevered feeling had not been elaborated to real poetical compass, it was of the standard sort. He might have been called the Rousseau of Egdon. Rousseau, the idealist. And what do idealists feel about love? They love things which are unattainable, like Petrarch did. Something which is attainable is mundane, ordinary. So this is Hardy using such glorious terms for our Damon Wilding. 7th chapter, the morning and the evening of a day. It's a very long chapter. So I'll just give you a gist of what actually happens here. This is the wedding morning. The wedding is over. Now something very complicated happens. So pay very close attention. First, Thomasin tells Mrs. Yeobright that she needs some money. Now she has some share, some guineas which she could convert into currencies, and Mrs. Yeobright decides to hand them over to Thomasin. Now just like Thomasin has this share of guineas, Clym also has an equal share of guineas, 50 guineas each. Mrs. Yeobright was at her home. She had decided to hand this over. Before this, Damon Wilding comes there. And of course, Damon would not go to the wedding of Eustacia Vi. So, Thomasin goes by herself. Damon tells Mrs. Yeobright that if you have something to give to Thomasin, you can give it to me. But Mrs. Yeobright knows that Damon might not give it to Thomasin. So, I shouldn't give things to Damon. I should directly give it to Thomasin. So, after Damon Wilding leaves, Christian Cantle, a servant native, he comes in and Mrs. Yeobright trusts Christian Cantle very much and gives him 2 bags. One for Clym, one for Thomasin, both carrying 50 guineas each. Christian Cantle was supposed to take 2 bags to Miss Tovernap, that is Eustacia's house. Today is Eustacia's wedding with Clym. So, Clym as well as Thomasin, they are both going to be present there. Christian's work or job was to take the 2 bags, give one bag to Clym and one bag to Thomasin. That was all he was supposed to do. It was evening time, but not a very dangerous time that he would be robbed. So Christian, he took the money very carefully, but he ended up getting into a different kind of trouble. He loved playing at the dice. And Wilding, who very well understood that he was carrying something, he wanted to get hold of whatever he was carrying. He started walking with Christian and he started talking. So you have money to carry to Mrs. Wilding, said Christian's companion. Don't you think it very odd that it shouldn't be given to me? I am Mrs. Wilding's husband. I am Mr. Wilding. So you just give that money to me. As man and wife be one flesh, it would have been all the same, I should think. But my strict documents was to give the money to Mrs. Wilding's hand. It is well to do things rightly. I got this instruction to give it to your wife. so I'm sorry I can't give it to you. No doubt. How very warm it is, Christian. Let us sit down for a few minutes for heaven's sake. They start sitting and playing dice. By and by, Christian loses all the money that was there in Thomasin's share. Later, he goes on playing and loses whatever was there in Yeobright's share, Clym Yeobright's share. So he loses all 100 guineas to Wildeve. After getting the money, Wildeve wants to return because of course he would not go to Mistover, when suddenly the Riddleman came. And then these two started playing dice. And that happens in chapter 8. A new force disturbs the current. And what new force? The force of the Riddleman. Riddleman starts to play, and by, there are many minor things that start happening, sometimes these insects start interrupting, sometimes people come in, and through all this, the Riddleman manages to get hold of all the money. Wildeve loses it all, but the problem is, Riddleman never knew that it was Clym's share that was part of that bag's content. He thought that the entire money belonged to Thomasin, because Wildeve told him, this is my wife's money, when they first start talking. After losing, Wildeve has nothing to do. The Riddleman, he approaches the road through which two carts were coming. First came the cart of Clym Yeobright and Eustacia, where he greets them. And then comes the cart of Thomasin, that is Mrs. Wildeve, and Riddleman goes on to give that 100 guineas to Thomasin. Thomasin recovered from her surprise. Thomasin was very surprised. Why is the Riddleman giving me money? How come my share goes to his hands? Anyway, she takes the money, thanks him. Thus, when, in his anxiety to rectify matters, has placed in Thomasin's hand not only the 50 guineas which rightly belonged to her, but also the 50 intended for her cousin Clym. His mistake had been based upon Wildeve's word at the opening of the game, when he indignantly denied that the guinea was not his own. So there we have a very complicated thing happening, and how this will affect Clym, how this will affect his dreams now that he doesn't have his share from his mother. Two things will definitely happen. One, he will never understand that his mother actually wants to forgive him, because when you offer your child the inheritance, then you are also offering a kind of forgiveness, a kind of desire to accept things. So that blessing is denied to him. And second is, he is now without any resource to make that school a reality. Now he has to depend on outside crowdfunding in a way. But Riddleman's intentions were good. He wanted to help. But sometimes chance and coincidence play such vital roles in this novel. And this is the most important point when you're writing about chance and coincidence in The Return of the Native, because this whole thing happened because of these games of dice. We are at this very important juncture now. We can say we have reached the climax now that they are married. And how things turn out from there, will there be action rising any further, or will there be falling action? Will there be a peripety, a reversal of expectation? That we will find out when we'll read the fourth book very soon in this channel. Thank you for being with us. Please keep commenting on which are the things you want me to explain, which character you have really started to like so far in this book, and if you think Clym is heroic in any way at all. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. So till our next video, stay happy, stay safe. Bye-bye.